Next, we have our patient panel. Our very own Cayenne Flint will be moderating the panel. Cayenne is a current member of the Duncan Seminar Planning Committee and a LEND trainee this year. I will hand it over to Cayenne.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today and moderate our patient panel. I'm Cayenne Flint. I am a current student at Central Washington University, pursuing a master's in child development in hopes of becoming a child life specialist. And as it was just mentioned, I am a LEND trainee this year and super grateful for that opportunity. Today I have 4 panelist members. I see Morgan. Yeah, I was trying to see who else. Let's see, did Meg?
I'm here.
Meg made it on. Yay.
I'm Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, hello, Elizabeth. And then did Kat make it on?
Yes, I'm
Yeah, hello, Kat. I'm glad you were able to make it on. Okay, so real quick, my pronouns are she, her, and I am a white woman with blonde hair, a white young woman with blonde hair. Yeah, and I'm super excited for this today. So I would love for each of our panel members to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So Meg, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Meg Paulson. I live in Snohomish. I'm 58, soon to be 59, and I was born with spina bifida. And I work as a consultant and am happy to be here.
Yay. Okay, Kat, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Cayenne. First of all, I'm so excited to be reunited with you. I don't know if all of you know, but I've known Cayenne since Miss Wheelchair America in 2017, so it's nice to be reunited. Anyway, my name is Captain Magnoli. I am a person living with spina bifida. I have short brown hair, and I am wearing a dark navy blue dress with yellow and purple flowers on it, and wearing red lipstick. So just to get all the description out of the way. I am also a children's book author and public speaker, and I am currently on the board of Commission for Disability Issues Board in Miami-Dade. And that's pretty much it. And I also just recently hosted the Christopher Reeve Summit in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Kat. And Morgan, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Morgan Bachman, and again, just to get the descriptions out of the way, because I sometimes forget to do that, I am a shorter person with moderate or medium brown hair and a white woman wearing pretty basic makeup. I'm about to be 24 actually next week. I'm excited. And I'm working on my master's degree in speech language pathology. Currently working as a speech language pathology assistant in the pediatric realm. And I'm a person living with spina bifida and a few other things that I'll probably mention later on. But I'm excited to be here. Oh, and my pronouns are she, her. I forgot that part.
Yay. And then Elizabeth, it's nice to meet you over Zoom or over WebEx.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me. My name is Elizabeth Scriven. I use she, her pronouns. My visual description is I'm a mid-40s white woman with dark brown hair, and I am wearing a brown sweater over a magenta and brown patterned blouse. I too live with spina bifida, T10, T11. I, by day, am a clinical psychologist in co-occurring disorders, so addiction and mental health. And all my outside of work projects are around work. I do a lot of stuff with the Spina Bifida Association nationally, and I'm doing some advocacy work on a psychology kind of a level around disability and supporting healthcare workers in supporting people with disability from a kind of an ableism is trauma kind of a framework. And so I hope to be doing more educational opportunities for all health and human service providers in the coming year.
Awesome. Thank you so much all for joining, and I'm super excited to get started with the conversation. I think I'll go in the reverse order. So, Elizabeth, if you're willing to go first in answering what accessibility means to you, I would love to hear, as a person living with spina bifida, what accessibility means to you.
Yeah, so I'm a manual wheelchair user. And I think that's really important. That does not even show up in the video. Video chats are quite the equalizer when you're a wheelchair user. I think accessibility for me, I love that slide that was that last slide on the presentation. And I think for me, accessibility is a combination of getting what I need to meet my accommodation needs and moving into universal design where I don't have to worry about calling and getting a hotel room. I don't have to worry about calling ahead of time and making sure I can get into the comedy club or the whatever it is, that I can just go and know it will be fine. I think equity is great. And I think there's a lot of historic spaces that it's always going to be more equity in getting my accommodation needs met. And I'm really hopeful that moving forward, we can help change some attitudes and insert some new knowledge and see more universal design and environments.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I love that you mentioned universal design and moving forward into creating spaces where we don't necessarily have to plan ahead as disabled individuals. Awesome. Okay, Morgan, what does accessibility mean to you?
Okay, so I wholeheartedly agree with you, Elizabeth, on the universal design and making things where we can travel and do everything that our able-bodied peers can do with ease and not feel stressed out in that sense, and just know that the environment is made for you. But trying to go a different direction, I also really feel like accessibility has a lot to do with having a seat at the table. I am currently in an internship, so my program does practicum experiences throughout the entire time that I'm in my master's degree, and we have across the age span. And the last 2 semesters I've been in a school that I genuinely felt like my opinion was respected. I never had any of the things that I have had from, just people in public sometimes talking down to me or almost being shocked that I have something to bring to the table. So just feeling like I am meant to be in a space with everyone of all different abilities, characteristics, everything is the biggest thing for me when it comes to accessibility.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Yes, having a voice at the table, being listened to, and then actions being taken because of what we say is so crucial to improving accessibility for those of us with disabilities. Okay, Kat, what does accessibility mean to you? What do you want to add to the conversation?
Well, first off, I totally agree with the 2 prior women that went before me. They had wonderful points. But I just want to add that for me, accessibility is freedom. It's independence. It's letting me know that I belong in society and that society welcomes me into whatever room I choose to be in, and that in itself lets me know that they want to hear my voice. They want to hear my opinions because they're giving me this space. They're giving me this avenue to get into wherever it is that I need to be. And so that's what I feel about accessibility. And I also just recently read in a wonderful book called No Pity that disability is kind of subjective, because if you actually make accommodations and you make accessibility happen, then you take away that person's challenge. You take away that person's disability because you're giving them access to where they need to go. So it's just such an important thing to have accessibility.
Thank you, Kat. And Meg, I would love to hear why is accessibility important to you? And
Well,
yeah.
everything that these other lovely ladies have mentioned. And I think that I cannot believe that people have not met a person with a disability, that I run into. And so it's just that normalization of us being seen in the media, us being represented in all types of media, and I think most importantly, just knowing that a business or a public space has had somebody with different types of impairments come in and say, okay, this is missing. I need this, and really utilizing people who have that perspective and that experience of actually sitting in a wheelchair to come in and say, wow, everything is how I need it here. I mean, I have done extensive travel, and there's nothing worse than going into a hotel room and everything, I can get into the bathroom and everything, but then the mirror starts here. And so I know immediately, okay, they have not used a consultant or an engineer when designing their room who is from the standpoint or the perspective that I need them to come from. And so accessibility to me is forethought on universal design. And I work in the real estate industry. And one of the things that we really focus on is visitability, which is kind of hard to say, but it means, even if you don't have a need for a ramp or some type of mobility entrance into your home and layout, that's all on the first floor, then I can't visit you. And, just having that forethought of, even people that can't relate are saying, okay, well, it's important that, my family members or my friends who have a disability can come and visit me rather than them having to come to you. So inclusion and normalcy. It's easy, I think, for people to view people with disabilities as either a zero or a hero, where either you're down and out and, in a really negative situation, or you're out doing all these, wonderfully advocating things. But then there are so many of us who are just right in that middle, who are just going about our lives with our families and our jobs. And so it's really that perception that we're people. That to me is accessibility and equity.
Meg, I love that you transitioned into our next question about misconceptions that society may still hold about individuals with disabilities, or spina bifida specifically. And you were mentioning like being down and out, and so not capable of doing anything, or like we're put on a pedestal and we're like super inspirational, but nothing in between, like just being average humans going about our lives on wheels. So I'm gonna go back in reverse again. So Meg, would you like to add about any specific misconceptions? I know you just mentioned a couple, but misconceptions that society or the medical field may hold about individuals with spina bifida.
I think the most irritating perception or misconception is that we cannot speak for ourselves, and therefore we need to ask a family member, or we're not believed, or we're not even held able to process, questions. And so we're left being ignored or bypassed because people are uncomfortable, or they just think, because of those assumptions, they're, not going to get to know me as a person, and that all I am, and as humans, we normally are just judging, and that's a survival skill. But it can really be not a benefit to the person that you're judging, and just taking that time to approach us as people and not a condition. And so, and again, I think that comes from being represented in the media and in everyday life. And so that it becomes normal to meet a person with a disability. And hopefully some of those assumptions can be put aside and not so negatively affect us as the end user of that assumption.
Thank you, Meg. Morgan, would you like to add to the conversation about misconceptions that society or the medical field holds about people with spina bifida?
Yeah, so I totally agree with everything you've said so far. It is the most irritating in my day-to-day life, having people try to, ask my mom a question, or even when I was in college, they'd ask my college roommate questions, thinking that she was my caregiver, things like that, and having that attitude of going through college, the amount of people that seemed mind blown that I was going through college as someone with spina bifida is not okay. The fact that that's the perception is like, huh, what? How are you doing that? It's not great. But the other misconception that's really big in my life, and I think it's unique, you never know what people experience, but something that I have found has been unique to my experience is in the medical field, there's a really big misconception that spina bifida, when you have spina bifida, you can't have other things. And I don't mean other things. There are certain things that are comorbid. Like you can, typically people have hydrocephalus and neurogenic bladder and bowels. But I have a connective tissue disorder on top of spina bifida. So I have breakable skin. My first spina bifida closure actually took 3 tries because the sutures and everything would just completely fall apart. And it took me until I was 19 to figure that out, because I was going to doctors and I was saying my arms hurt a lot more than, the average person. And all of my spine surgeries have failed the first try. They've had to pack wounds and stuff because my skin just won't heal. And I kept telling doctors, I'm like, my friends with spina bifida look at me like I have 3 eyes when I tell them some of my symptoms. So it's not this, there's no way this is spina bifida related. And it took me, they were always like, oh, well, maybe it's just because you use a chair. Maybe it's just because you're sitting all the time. Maybe it's because you've had so many surgeries. And I'm like, well, that wouldn't explain the first one. And I finally got to a doctor when I was 19 that was like, let me just send you to genetics, because then we can really hone down what's happening. And lo and behold, I have classical Ehlers-Danlos syndrome on top of that. So I think that's something, and later on, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but when it comes to medical community and being more open, I think one of the misconceptions is that all of us fit in this little box, and these are the symptoms that these people feel, and this is how everything is to this book or box. And there are those of us that are snowflakes, we're in zebras, we don't fit the typical description.
Thank you for sharing that, Morgan. I feel like that is common with a disability that has specific symptoms, but we're
is visible.
Also, yes. And so, just because we have a certain diagnosis doesn't mean that we fit a specific box, because everyone's different. And I know that spina bifida is known as or said to be the snowflake disease, but or disorder, I feel like that's just anyone. None of us can fit in a box. So thank you for bringing that to the table. Okay, Kat. One misconception that you believe society still holds about spina bifida, or specifically the medical field holds about spina bifida?
Well,
I want to kind of break it down into sections. So for children, when I go to advocate to them, their first response when I ask them, how do you feel seeing me in a wheelchair, is that they feel sorry for me. So they're already trained in their brain at a young age that disability is something to pity. And the cool part is that when I read my story to them, they then are like, oh my God, you are so cool. Does your chair fly too? Like, where's your magic button? And they get so excited about it. So that's one misconception that I think is just like ingrained in society at a very young age, is that we're something to pity. I also feel as people get older, they then turn that pity into like, oh my God, you're out in the world. You're such an inspiration. Like, I can't believe you're going to a store by yourself. And it's just, it's mind boggling to me that like they still think that way. So I always stop people when they say like, God bless you, or you're an inspiration. I'm like, really? Am I an inspiration because I'm in a wheelchair? Or am I an inspiration because I'm an author and a public speaker and I was Miss Wheelchair Florida, and I like make all these like lists of the things that I've done, and they're like, oh my God, yes, like that's amazing. And so they so then they again shift their perception when I educate them on what it's like to really be a person with a disability, at least the kind of person with a disability that I choose to be. As we mentioned, there are different kinds that are just, trying to live their life, and that's fine. I choose to be an active advocate, and I don't think that there's any right or wrong way to live your life. But I choose to educate those people when they say those things to me. And lastly, in the medical field, I want to tell kind of a serious story that I mentioned last night in another Zoom that I was in. So I was getting an ultrasound for my kidneys because I too have separate things going on with my spina bifida. I'm a dialysis patient. My kidneys failed 17 years ago. So again, yes, it is the snowflake disease. And so when I was getting this ultrasound, the technician was just asking all these questions about like, do you live alone? Do you drive? Asking me all these personal things. And I'm answering them. Then all of a sudden he just gets like really serious. He's like, well, did your mom know that you were going to be born with a disability? And I was like, actually, it didn't show up in the ultrasound. He's like, oh, well, that's good because she probably would have aborted you. So I think I think this just negative feeling that maybe like is in the medical field because there's not enough disability etiquette training when they're in the school system and when they're in medical school, and they don't learn how to treat us like equals. I think that that's a huge issue that I have faced. Another example of that is constantly being asked if I can stand up to get like my weight, or if I can stand up to get on the bed. And I'm just like, I can transfer onto the bed, but I can't stand up. And they'll ask me like several times. So it's just disability etiquette training that I personally think is needed in the medical field.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for sharing, Kat. I definitely agree. The need for disability etiquette, more disabled voices within the medical community, and that's why that's why I'm so excited to have you all today. All adults living with spina bifida, living your lives, whether that just be going on your like day to day or educating as you go along your way. But I just love to be able to show that there are incredible humans living with spina bifida. And so I'm thankful that all of you want to share that too, and misconceptions. And last but not least, about misconceptions in society or the medical field specifically, Elizabeth, will you add to the conversation?
Yes. First, I want to name that we're not talking about misconceptions right now. We're talking about ableist ideas.
Okay, thank you.
And that is very, very different than just misconceptions. Ableism is a set of beliefs, values, thoughts, and or behaviors that discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities, and it results in inaccessible environments, unhelpful attitudes, and untrue assumptions about people with disabilities that put unwarranted limits on those with disabilities across a variety of life domains. So that is what we are talking about. And I want to be very clear on that because one is my soapbox right now. I'm doing a lot of advocacy work on ableism. Two, I'm in a lot of spina bifida social media groups, and I can't tell you how many times the comments that I see in there are internalized ableism, and people think they can't have children. They think they can't go to school. They think they have to live on Medicare for the rest of their natural lives because of the ableism we have been spoon-fed since the time we were born. And probably, honestly, prenatally, our the people who gave birth to us were probably also spoon-fed that ableism. So I want to be very clear about that. That is a very different system. It's not just misconceptions. And so for me, it shows up everywhere. It shows up when I have to advocate for a line item on my DME receipt because I don't know what my bill is for. It's 10 things and they're billing me $200. Okay, but I paid my bill. Where did this next $200 come from? I don't know. It's transparency in medical billing. It's having a conversation with my primary care doctor or my specialist that honor my knowledge and expertise on me and my body and hear me when I say something isn't right. And they don't blame this or that or the other. They say, let's look into that. Let's figure that out together. I, about 5 or 6, so maybe 10 years ago now, got to do an orthopedic consult with a children's orthopedic doctor.
Thank you, Elizabeth,
You're welcome.
for sharing.
I got to follow up with an orthopedic doctor at Children's about some hip issues I was having. And he told me that it wasn't going to improve my quality of life enough to even have a discussion. That's ableism. And it shows up everywhere. It shows up when people are asking me how I get to work. Well, I drive a car. It shows up at the grocery store when someone is so inspired because I'm doing my weekly grocery shopping. It shows up when I'm, any number of ways. I could go on and on and on. And so I think that is the biggest issue that we all face as people with disability, whether it's spina bifida or cerebral palsy or autism or hard of hearing deaf or visually impaired or legally blind. Fill in the blank. The problem is ableism. And thank you for listening to my soapbox.
Totally agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. I totally agree. Yes, I totally agree. Thank you for putting the term ableism into the conversation because everything that was being shared is much more than misconceptions, and how we're treated within the healthcare system and society in general is so crucial to our quality of life and how we can move throughout our daily lives. So I so appreciate what you are sharing, and I apologize for interrupting. Okay. I would like to start with you, Elizabeth, as on our next question. As an adult with spina bifida, I know that maternal fetal surgery is a controversial topic, not only for parents who are potentially having a child with spina bifida because of the maternal health risks, as well as just prematurity that may occur. But it's also controversial within the spina bifida community. So I would love to hear, as an adult with spina bifida, what are your thoughts on maternal fetal surgery?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I overall am in support of it. Like the damage of spina bifida is ongoing throughout pregnancy if something isn't done sooner rather than later. I came in at the end of the last presentation where she talked a little bit about language and how we talk about these things. And I think that's my biggest concern with how fetal surgery is presented is how are you languaging it? How is it being contextualized? What expectations are being set? Some of the damage by the time you're doing fetal surgery has already happened. So your child is still going to be born with spina bifida. They might still have the Kochari-2 malformation. They might still have some hydrocephalus. They might still have neurogenic bowel and bladder and need AFOs or other walking devices and assisted. And I'm not sure how well that gets communicated all the time. And I'm really a big believer in informed consent and to be able to give consent in an informed way, you need the information. And then I think for in support, as long as it's contextualized and languaged in a way the parents can make an informed, educated decision on whether or not it's the best option for them, and also make plans for the future. So, because after that baby is born, they're going to have some sequelae related to this spina bifida. So, how are the doctors and the support team going to support those parents in those first couple years of life with that baby to make sure that they get all the things that they need to stay healthy?
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like information for informed consent is so critical in of healthcare so that we can make the best decisions for ourselves and our families. So thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. Okay, Kat. What, as an adult with spina bifida, what is your thought? What are your thoughts about maternal fetal surgery?
Well, again, I feel like if it's really up to the parent, if they don't want to raise a child with spina bifida, then I guess that's on them. Personally, I kind of take offense to it because I think I'm pretty cool. So and I always say that, I wish there was someone else in my family, like a little one who also has spina bifida, so I could kind of like be their mentor and teach them all my ways of living. But that hasn't happened, and I guess that's just God's plan. But yeah, so I think that it's a good thing because it gives a parent the option of whether or not they want to move forward with it, with the pregnancy in that way. But at the same breath, it kind of feels like they're saying that we need to kind of be erased from society, almost, like, in a way. If I'm understanding what maternal fetal surgery is, am I correct? It's the surgery that like fixes the fetus inside, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's kind of like a double-edged sword because I think it's good for the parent to have the option. I think a woman should have a choice, and both parents should have a choice of how they want to raise their children. But I also feel like it's just one more step into almost like erasing the community of people with spina bifida, because it's like, hey, once you all die out, maybe there won't be any more because all these other parents are going to decide to do this surgery. So it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I think it's progress, but it's also, regression at the same time.
yeah, I believe that's why.
Oh, it's just me. It's me, Cayenne.
Yeah.
It's Emily, one of the Duncan committee.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I believe. Hi, Emily.
Yeah.
I was gonna add to what you were saying, Kat. Like, I believe that's why Elizabeth was saying informed consent is so important because, like, maternal fetal surgery isn't necessarily eliminating spina bifida, but I think a lot of people have the misconception that that is what it does. And so when there is that belief, yes, it's almost saying like we want to erase spina bifida, but like either way, if a fetus has an opening, like there needs to be closure at some point.
For sure.
48 hours of birth.
Yeah, mine was
So like
actually done
either way.
yeah, actually.
Yeah, but I know what you're meaning, Kat. Like that essence of like fixing earlier to potentially eliminate spina bifida is, in a sense, if I'm hearing you correctly, offensive because like you have spina bifida and it's not a big, like it's a part of who you are. So eliminating or trying to eliminate spina bifida is like saying that it's okay to eliminate part of your identity.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. And again, if I was wrong in not really understanding the question, then I do apologize to the other panelists, because this is something that I haven't really researched too much, and I only know like surface level information about it. So I do apologize.
This brings up.
No,
Oh, sorry, Can I just say something really quick? Because
yeah, please do, Emily. I'm sorry.
really cool point, an important point about why it is so important to have folks like you sitting at the table. So what might be a really cool thing for fetal care centers to consider is bringing people in with the disabilities that these families may experience, right? These people may experience. And how do we message what the surgery is? We need to message it to everyone, including the disability community, right?
Yes.
And so having people with disabilities sitting at that table talking as advocates and experts in their experience might serve everybody better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Thank you
that's just
so
what I
much.
was like thinking as we were talking through, because there is like, a worry when we're intervening fetally. What are we really doing? Are we erasing this? And that's not what it is, but we should really be thinking about that as healthcare providers before we start offering this procedure to what it will be like. How will it be experienced in the broader community? So that you brought up a really excellent, it all made really amazing sense. So thanks so much for sharing. I just needed to
Yes.
Thank
toss
you.
in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. And yeah, Kat, this is an open table, and it's awesome that you're sharing your perspective as an adult with spina bifida. So, like, whatever you're saying, like, please don't feel like you're not, like, saying the right thing, or, like, just be, yeah, like,
You.
we want to make sure that your experience is validated.
I
Like,
used to
it's so
feel very
crucial.
similarly, and it's with the modern, like newer research and newer things that I've read and newer kind of improved methods of fetal surgery that like I've shifted. But I was very against fetal surgery for spina bifida for a long time because of the risks, and it did feel like erasure. I've learned since it's not full erasure, and other surgical modalities have shifted and become safer. But yeah, I used to feel that way too.
Okay. Thank you, Kat and Elizabeth. Morgan or Meg, for the sake of time, do either of you have thoughts that you would like to add about fetal surgery? If not, that's okay, but I want to ensure that you both have a chance.
I have very quick comments, so I will try to get it out as
If you
quick
would
as
like to add
possible.
to the conversation.
I have
Okay.
some very quick comments. I'll try to go as fast as I can. But I think going off of what Kat said, it really has to do with the wording of how it's approached when you talk to the families, because you don't want that perception to be like, oh, we're trying to cure them, because it's not a cure. I personally was never offered that. Like, that was never on the table because my family didn't know I had spina bifida until the day I was born. So I don't know. I never really researched it because I didn't have that as an option, but I've heard really great things about it. But at the same time, I think it needs to be an approach of like, hey, this might help with some of the damage, especially to organs and things like that, because we don't want to erase our disability. But at the same time, if someone's at a higher risk of kidney issues or, certain things because of the level that they're at, then yes, that probably is a choice to think about, to try to limit that damage and improve quality of life. But also, as a speech pathologist, my immediate thought is you still have to bring in the topic of early intervention, because it's not a cure. They are still going to, when a baby is born, have to go through physical therapy, occupational therapy, and have those services around them to feel supported in whatever, because like we all said, it's a snowflake condition. So having that support system for whatever that child's path may be, the things that may come along, it doesn't need to, that conversation about the fetal surgery shouldn't be left as like, we're going to do this, that's it. I think all of it needs to be brought up on the table up front. And like, this is what's going to happen regardless. These are your options. Let's talk about risk and benefits.
Awesome.
And I'm just going to add that when I was born almost 60 years ago, they didn't even have sonograms. So it was a big surprise to my parents that I had spina bifida. Luckily, they knew how to help me. I was born at a military hospital, so that may have helped a little bit too. But I think that as a person living with spina bifida, if that procedure was available when I was born, I think that I would have wanted my parents to do something that could, especially as I age and I have sciatica and around my lesion area, I have arthritis and things like that. If there could have been something done like that, that would alleviate some of my issues of aging and just my biology breaking down as I age, I would, and as a parent, if I was carrying a baby that had any type of condition that could be improved, not cured, but improved, then I think it's a good thing. I think that parents are also having to take a look at their support systems. And, is bringing a quote special needs child into the world something that they can afford financially? Do they have the family support? Do they have a medical community that is supportive? Do they have organizations like the Spina Bifida Association in their state or in their local area so that they can get the support that it takes to raise a child that is atypical or not necessarily going to be an easy road? So again, information overload is what is needed.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for approaching this topic with just your personal experience. And I think it's so crucial to hear from adults with spina bifida about new interventions that are happening in the medical field and how you all feel about it, because I know it wasn't an option for your families. But to balance that, to add that to the conversation is so crucial moving forward. And I love that there was talk earlier about having self-advocates with spina bifida as a part of the conversation. So I would love to see that in the future about any intervention for any disorder that a child can be born with.
When I was, just to interject, Cayenne, when I was the executive director of the Spina Bifida Advocates here in Washington, that's one of the things that we did is I would go in to the hospitals and meet with the families that had just had a baby with spina bifida. And again, there are so many nuances and so many spectrums of disability that, even though I'm coming in as this person with spina bifida, that doesn't mean that they're going to be as high functioning or as low functioning or whatever you want to put it as I am. So I think it's important to provide a spectrum, because it's not, you can't just base your knowledge on one person.
Oh yeah.
With a disability, with that same disability.
Totally. Okay. So coming to our last question, what is one piece of advice that you would like to offer to the medical community in hopes of decreasing the disparities that individuals with spina bifida face in healthcare? And Meg, I'll start with you.
I would say believe your patients and approach your patients with a clean slate. Listen to them when they are talking about their situations and their pains and their the suffering that they're going through, and don't let your ableism cloud that. And just really, I did a video for Alaska Airlines years ago, and I think it can be applied to the medical community, and it was called Just Ask. And if you're unsure of how to help somebody, you need to ask them. But then the second part of that is that you need to listen. And I think, and be seen and understood, and not just put in a box or said, okay, well, because you have this, you need this and this and this. And, you know, I have other side disabilities, if you want to call it that. And so I have multiple disabilities. I'm also a dialysis patient. And so, you know, I'm not just one peg that fits in one hole. You know, I fit in several different ones. So, but I've learned to adapt, and that's what you do as a person with a disability.
Thank you, Meg. Okay, Morgan, what is one piece of advice that you would like to offer to the medical community in hopes of decreasing disparities for patients with spina bifida?
My biggest piece of advice actually was already sort of mentioned, but I think it's just when it comes to listening to your patients, I think it's important, as especially someone who has side disabilities and has had things that are not in the box of spina bifida, looking at us as a whole person and seeing symptoms rather than a person with spina bifida, because that sometimes, I think, once there's one diagnosis or one thing pegged, it's got to be that. There's no, like, there's not a, granted, I'm not saying this is generalized, because I have some amazing doctors now, and I've, you know, I've had the whole end of the spectrum. But I think it's good for them to listen and see us as, oh, for me, bladder wise, I like Metrophenol he figured out was actually going to hurt me because of my skin issues. So having them like, oh, well, but you actually kind of might fit what we do for spinal cord injury, or I've had this patient that has something similar, but has this other issue. Maybe this is better. And just trying to think outside the box when what is typical is not working. And then really, really quick, the other piece of advice that I think added on was having that full spectrum, like they said, of showing new families to the disability community, hey, this is the whole range, you know, these different families have all these different experiences, and like have them be provided advocates on all ends, because my parents were initially only sent to a family whose child was in a vegetable lake state, quote unquote, at the time. That's what they called it, and like blind, deaf, not able to do anything, and they just flat out said, this is what your life's going to be like. And obviously that wasn't the case, and no one knows at that little of an age what their life's going to be like. So it's really important to bring the whole perspective in. And again, treating the whole person, really.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. Kat, what is one piece of advice that you would like to offer to the medical community in hopes of decreasing disparities for the spina bifida community?
I just would tell them to educate themselves and to keep us in the conversation. Keep this kind of platform going. Maybe have this be like a yearly thing, or, you know, every 6 months, have one of us come in and talk to you about what's going on with us medically, and educate yourself. That is the most important thing, and that will help you understand how to talk to us, how to treat us. And I think that that's the most important thing. And then also, not just with the doctors who are already in the field, but do that also with the medical field students that are, you know, coming up into the world and are learning. Have disability etiquette training in colleges for the medical field, so they understand how to approach certain conversations and certain aspects of living that we go through. And I think that that's the most important thing, is just educating yourself and continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Kat. And then Elizabeth, what is one piece of advice that you would like to offer to the medical community?
Yeah, so all the things that we've talked about today in general are pieces of tidbits, but I think the more practical piece is honestly more integrated care into adulthood. I graduated out of children's when I was 18. I am now 44 and have not had spina bifida specific care since. And not only have I not had it, I know more about spina bifida than my primary care doctor, and I love her. She is amazing. She listens to me and discusses things with me, but she knows nothing about spina bifida. And so the closest I've been able to get is some spinal cord doctors, spinal cord injury doctors, and physiatrists, which are helpful, but it's not the same thing. So I would love to see more adult spina bifida clinics. I would love to see more training as spina bifida as a lifelong disability that needs to be managed and cared for throughout the lifespan, not just a pediatric illness, because we now live well into adulthood. We don't die anymore, and or in general. And so I would like to see that. I want to know how to age healthfully, and I feel like I'm stabbing in the dark sometimes.
Totally agree.
Yes.
I agree. 100%. That was a great way to end it, Elizabeth.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you to all four of you for joining us today and sharing your stories, your experiences, bringing your lived experience and your voices to the table. And I so wholeheartedly appreciate it. And for this opportunity for adults with spina bifida to share your story. And I believe we have a few more minutes for questions. If the four of you are open to.
And I just wanted to make a quick comment before I forget, because once we get into questions, we'll get distracted.
Yeah, please do.
I am always open to, because I've seen a lot of comments of, oh, I have a patient who has spina bifida, or I have someone who has spina bifida in the family dealing with this issue. And I am always open to, I actually just recently started a disability group in Tampa Bay area to provide that mentorship and things like that, just because I think community is the biggest way to help people figure out what's best for them going forward. So if, I don't know if like through you or if I should put it in the chat, but I would be happy to provide my information. So if later on people who have been here or even just heard about it end up having like, oh, I want to get some more advice from people who've lived it, I would be happy to provide whatever information people want.
I also do mentorships.
That's actually what got me on the topic. I saw your comment on mentorship and I was like, let me add to that. I'm totally fine to add to this.
I want to thank all of the panel members for being here today. We are truly, truly grateful for your opening up, sharing your thoughts, experiences, perspectives, all of that. It's really, really important to have your voice here so that we all can do better as a society. I really, really appreciate your time and your willingness to open up. There is a quick question in the chat from Peggy. What was the name of the book? Was it called No Pity?
Yes. Yes, the book is called No Pity.
Thank you. One question from Stephanie L. This question is, like transparency in mental health, how do you feel increased transparency regarding personal, seen or unseen disabilities might improve your own experiences? Also, how might relabeling disability to take into account more than ability, different abilities but still able?
Yeah.
I can talk on that one if no one else is ready. I think that relabeling this, but also having the transparency of our lived experience helps us to kind of have our needs met better, because I kind of went the total opposite direction of like, what some people have said they've experienced or seen people experience, where I had no friends with disabilities until I was 16, 17, because my local little tiny Newport Richey community, town I live in, spina bifida community, were the people that had just believed what the doctors had said. They weren't going to go to public school. They weren't going to be participate in much. And so I never related. But then I also kind of ended up with like a toxic Like I was trying to overdo it and not recognize that I needed certain things. And so being transparent about, I've learned being transparent about everything makes people recognize the needs that I have. And so I'm not pushing my body to the point of it breaking down. And I am having the accommodations that I need put in place. And it gives me, I feel like it has given me more confidence at the table, wherever that may be. But I also feel like it's helping with the respect that people have for me, because I'm fully honest about, okay, these are the things that I can do and this is what I bring to the table, but this is also what I need. And I feel like it just has created a better balance that is more sustainable long term.
I think telling our stories are really the only way that other people who cannot relate to being us are is really the only way to educate other people. And I think as long as we're transparent and as a victor and not as a victim of our situations, can really help people aspire and not be inspiring, but to aspire to be better people, not just with disabilities, but more empathetic, more compassionate, and just, education and understanding is the bridge to being accepted and being respected. And so I think by sharing both our challenges, but also our solutions, that so much can be learned by other people who may today not need the information or the perspective that we're sharing, but down the line, if you have an accident or are diagnosed with a disease, that maybe you'll have a little bit more information not to put that ableism on yourself. And I think that's the gold within our stories, is to help others.
Well, and I would say languaging is a personal choice. And I know all sorts of people with disability who prefer person first, disability first, disability, capital A, lowercase d, and there is no right or wrong because it's about me and what fits me. I identify as disabled, capital D, disability first. And by doing that, I empower myself to define that and what it means for me rather than let myself be defined by that phrase. But that doesn't fit everybody. And so hashtag say the word is a really great movement around disability and languaging if you're curious to learn more. And they explore all the history of disability languaging and kind of put it into today's kind of context around critical race theory. There's critical disability theory and things. And it's a very dynamic conversation.
And I think it portrays that we don't need to be fixed, that we are valid.
I'm just fine the way I am.
Yes, we are valid. And that's what I really dislike about the word invalid, because it's really invalid. And we are valid human beings.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Meg, Elizabeth, Kat, and Morgan, for sharing your lived experience with us all today. I really do appreciate you all and having you all at the table and sharing with everyone who's here today. And thank you all for listening to their stories too.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Spread the word.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thank you so much, everybody.